Hello and a very warm welcome to our studios here in the capital, Tehran. You're tuning to PressTV International News. Thanks for joining us. The German Chancellor Angela Merkel has warned against supplying weapons to insurgents fighting against the Syrian government. Addressing Parliament, Merkel called on Britain, France and the United States to consider the consequences of arming the militants. She says the risk of doing this will be incalculable. Her comments come after Washington said it was planning to arm the insurgents in Syria. The European Union, under pressure from Britain and from France, also lifted an arms embargo on the militants last month. Damascus has accused the West of backing the insurgency since the beginning of the ongoing unrest. Meanwhile, a Pew Research poll has found little public support in the U.S. for a recent decision by the Obama administration to provide arms to Takfiri insurgents in Syria. The survey showed that 70% of U.S. adults oppose sending arms and military supplies to the insurgents. This is while only 20% are in favor of the decision. Similar polls have repeatedly shown that American people are opposed to their country's involvement in Syria. However, the U.S. government has said it will go ahead with its plan to arm the militants in the Arab country. Polls also showed in the past that most Americans were opposed to U.S. military expeditions to Iraq and to Afghanistan, but Washington invaded the two countries anyways. A former al-Qaeda member says the leader of the primary terrorist group in Syria, which is known as al-Nusra Front, is a CIA operative.
النظام الأمريكي لا يمكن يتفاوض مع جيش النصرة، وأعلن أن جيش النصرة مجموعة من الإرهابيين استعدادا لذبحه. لماذا أعلنت أمريكا أن جيش النصرة عصابات إرهابية؟ لأن المشكلة السورية هتتحل خلاص. فهم بيعدوا المذبحة لجيش النصرة. المشكلة السورية هتتحل، فلازم يجهز المذبحة لجيش النصرة. قالوا عليهم إرهابيين لأن جيش النصرة بيقول لك إحنا بعنا أيمن الظاهر. فهذا مبرر لذبح جيش النصرة. وأنا أظن أن زعيم جيش النصرة الذي أعلن مبايعة أيمن الظاهري عميل في CIA. طب أنت بقالك سنتين بتقاتل في سوريا.
Skeikh Nabil is calling on those who have joined the al-Nusra Front to be wary of the true objectives of the cause that they are fighting for. Skeikh Nabil, who led an al-Qaeda training camp in Egypt, says insurgents are fighting a war in Syria on America's behalf. He says Washington is trying to reap its own benefits from the war. He also said that U.S. support for al-Nusra Front and other opposition groups is part of the same campaign. Skeikh Nabil was a high-profile militant in Egypt and is believed to have been involved in the assassination of former Egyptian President Anwar al-Sadat back in 1981. He was released from prison after the regime of Hosni Mubarak collapsed in February of 2011. Well, fighting in Syria continues as government forces announce control over an important oil field in Homs province. In the meantime, more shocking footage is emerging that shows the brutalities committed by foreign-backed insurgents in the areas that they control.
More startling images find their way out of Syria. These two Syrians are about to face the fate of many others, being beheaded at the hands of al-Nusra Front, an al-Qaeda branch in Syria that proudly posts similar executions almost on a weekly basis. Last week alone, they posted 3 executions, one for a Syrian army sergeant in Hasaka, another for a man and 2 women in Aleppo, and a third one in Idlib. These bearded men, who are carrying out God's punishment, as they call it, are part of the insurgency that the Saudi foreign minister was so eager to arm in statements he made with his U.S. counterpart, John Kerry. The statements, however, got a strong and harsh response from Damascus. The Syrian Minister of Information, Omran al-Zobi, described the Saudi diplomacy as shaken by repeated victories of the Syrian army. He also said that such diplomacy does not represent the Saudi people and that it won't have any place in any political solution to the Syrian crisis. The Syrian official also stressed that the violence in Syria is perpetrated by Saudi Arabia by supplying weapons and funds to terrorists, and that Saud al-Faisal is responsible for shedding the Syrian blood. And not very far from all these killings, a group of Muslim clerics and scholars met in Damascus to issue a call for tolerance. A call to many seems out of context amidst religious and sectarian tensions spreading not only in Syria but across the region.
We're ignorant towards one another and we know little about each other. Our enemy is using this to infiltrate us using media outlets that it prepared years ago. The aim is for us to eliminate each other instead of our enemy doing this.
As days pass by, the Syrian crisis becomes more and more tangled. More militants, more weapons, and much more extremism. As a recipe for disaster, some would call it. A disaster that won't spare even those who stood behind it. But as the fighting goes on, many Syrians wonder where their country is heading for and what will their future be. Alaa, Ebrahim, PressTV, Damascus.
Meanwhile, it's been another deadly day in that country. State TV reports that a bomb has exploded in a Christian district of the capital, Damascus. A bomber set off an explosion in the central neighborhood of Bab Tuma, a historic Christian quarter of the Old City. 4 fatalities have been reported so far, but the number is expected to rise. Over a dozen more are expected to be injured. Foreign-backed insurgents are thought to be behind the attack. This is not the first attack on minorities in the country.